excited to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Office of Administrative Hearings. And this program is going to be exciting. It's going to focus on the history and some of the ongoing goals and vision for the future of the Office of Administrative Hearings. I'm honored to have been invited by our dynamic Executive Director of CCE, Misty Thomas Zaleski. So, Misty, thank you. Chief Judge Colleen Curry, the Chief Administrative Law Judge of OAH, and the panel of other distinguished guests this evening, including Robert, or Rob, as we most affectionately call him, Spagnoletti, of the DC Bar. I know Marianella Peralta is not here with us at the moment, but I did want to give her a shout out, as well as Paulette Chapman and Betsy Cavendish, General Counsel in the Executive Office of the Mayor. So thank you, and you're in for a treat with the panel. But I just wanted to say a few words about how critically important the Office of Administrative Hearings is and will continue to be in our legal community and in our judicial system here in the District of Columbia. I want to first recognize CCE for all that you have done to enhance access to justice in the District of Columbia, to partner with our DC courts on so many initiatives. And one of the initiatives, one of the many initiatives I want to call out, is the sea-changing report that the Council for Court Excellence issued in 1999 about creating a unified hearings agency, administrative hearings agency in the District of Columbia. And that served as the blueprint for what we now know affectionately as OAH. The DC Council created OAH to provide a fair, efficient, and effective forum to manage and resolve administrative disputes. And before OAH was created, there were concerns about conflicts of interest by the same agencies that adjudicated and resolved and created policy on issues were also adjudicating them. Since OAH began in 2004, CCE has continued to recommend changes because continuous improvement is what we all strive for. I know with our DC courts and in our DC legal community, that we are only as good as we continue to strive to be. And partnerships with groups like the Council for Court Excellence, with BAR, with our other stakeholders in the executive and legislative branches are critical to remaining relevant and responsive to the needs of the community that we serve. OAH has continued to evolve and improve, and today there are over 30 administrative law judges who decide contested cases involving more than 40 District of Columbia agencies, boards, and commissions. But one of the things that I'm most proud of, many of you may not know that after our criminal case law docket and our civil law docket on the Court of Appeals, the third largest category of appeals that we hear are from OAH agencies, heard by the administrative law judges of those agencies. And the professionalism, thoughtfulness, and detailed nature of the opinions and written decisions that they provide the Court of Appeals with are vitally important, and foster the administration of justice. So for all of the ALJs who are in the audience, if you want to raise your hand and And I think of, especially during COVID, when so many people in our country and in our city were suffering, unemployment insurance, workers' comp for those who suffered from COVID, you all did tremendous work, and I commend you and thank you for your excellent scholarship and your judicial acumen, your judicial temperament, and the hard work that you do. So I'm excited to be here this evening. I'm excited to hear the panel. Please forgive me if I slip out a little early, but we have oral arguments in the morning, and I have to do my homework. Especially if I'm going to hold everybody else and keep everybody else on their toes. So thank you, and I'm so pleased to see so many of you come out, especially on a lovely day with sunshine, I like to call it, earlier. So thank you, and I look forward to the panel, and Misty, I turn it over to you. Give a shout out to our new DC Superior Court Chief Judge, who you heard from earlier, Chief Judge Tony Lee, and I am glad to be working in partnership with you as you assume the reins of leadership at DC Superior Court.
Hello, friends. Hello, wonderful guests, and it's such a joy to be with you. I'm Misty Thomas-Gillespie. I'm the Executive Director of Council for Court Excellence. I can stand on the shoulders of my wonderful predecessors who are here too, and who were the ones who led the work on not only the founding. In fact, Sam, I brought CCE, as the chief said, here's a binder book from 1999 from the working groups that were doing the collaborative work on creating a unified administrative hearing agency. Many of you in the room as CCE board members have been part of many aspects of our work, supporting, encouraging the support needed for this important court. And so I'm honored to be standing on those shoulders of my colleagues and predecessors. June Kress here did great work on this issue as well. And I used to practice at OAH, which was really fun many moons ago. And so I have a fondness for the excellence of this court personally, and then the gift of wearing this hat. But what's really fun is going to be hearing a little bit about the founding, the views from the administration today, and then the vision of the wonderful chief administrative law judges here today.
was passed in 2001 before I even knew the thing existed. I show up in the role as the corporation counsel. And as it turns out, the legislation that created OAH also enabled cost. The commission on the selection and tenure of administrative law judges for the Office of Administrative Hearings. Very long name, cost is the shorthand. It was established in a way that there were different appointees to the commission. One of the appointees comes from the Office of
hearings that are online, and that has, in some sense, been good for access to justice because people don't have to necessarily take a good part of the day off or pay for $25 for parking to come downtown. They can call in many cases, and it's been good on the administration side. Like if we have an inspector who's going to be testifying, we don't want the inspector to be sitting in court all day. They can be out inspecting houses or whatever their job is, and then get phoned in when it's time to talk about the particular violation that's being adjudicated. So that was one big challenge that I think led to some positive reforms. You know, your CCE report that predated the pandemic called for more online, and I think that was kind of a kick. And I think it helped advance technologically too. I think at the beginning of the pandemic, if I'm not mistaken, I think filings had to be done with paper at the office. The clerk's office had paper. It sounds like we're a world now where people are trying to go paperless. It sounds so funny, and that was really pretty recent past. And now there's e-filing, and that's, I'd say, pretty monumental as well.
Well, when you were talking pre-pandemic, if you can, I think you have the stats, Andy, you can sort of set the stage of also just scope change from founding to now.
Oh, sure.
Maybe that might be interesting context setting for folks who don't know.
So in 2004, there were about 7,400 cases a year, and there are about 35,000 now. And as Bob was indicating, there were a smaller number of agencies, there were 8 agencies, and now there are 36 agencies. No, is that right? 36 agencies, yeah. And there are also, there were 5 ALJs at the outset, and there are 36 ALJs now. And I think the clerks and the support staff has also grown accordingly and play really important roles as well. So that those are really big developments. Now, the CCE report in 2016 said that jurisdiction shouldn't really be established by MOUs, the memorandums of understanding with an agency giving jurisdiction to OAH, and there's been some progress, I think, on that front in getting more statutory jurisdiction for OAH, and the council listened to that, and I think that's, like law, right? It's less informal and more law-like, and that's a good thing. And your report also called for more mediation, and I think that that's really expanded as another situation to grapple with this big docket, how many more of the cases can get mediated.
Well, knowing the hat that you sort of led within the advisory group, use your time, I think, a little bit to grab on what you think are some of the unique strengths of OAH from the vantage point that y'all sit, and from the executive's branch point if you're so willing to sort of speak. What do you think really makes OAH shine?
Well, I think that the first and most important thing is the perception of a fair shake. I think people who are getting a ticket or are getting crosswise with an agency may well get a fair shake at an agency's own hearing office, and it may be organizationally separate, but I think the perception of the fair shake is really much stronger if they're going to an agency that's mission and purpose is the fair and efficient administration of justice. So I think that's a key strength. I think a second one is that the diversity of the dockets leads to it being an attractive place for smart lawyers to work, and that you have both judges who are ALJs as a capstone to a distinguished career, lots of times in public service, but you also have judges who are using this job in kind of an ambitious way to go on to other jobs, and I think you have a distinguished group at OAH, and that's a strength to have such distinguished judges and not to overlook the important role of really other good staff, of general counsel's office, and people who work on tech, and people who manage the clerk's office, and there are lots of other good people. But I think it's a key strength that you attract good, OAH attracts good people to be judges. And I'd say part of heard some discussion about the slow progress on getting a new jail. And things like that that are really important and need to be done. People aren't always getting what they want and need, so maybe the resource question is a pain point. I think technology continues to be a pain point. I've been begging for decisions to be online. Coming up on 9 years and 11 months, I can round that to 10 years doing this advisory job for opinions to be online, and new opinions went online on October 1. And that's slow. I'd like to see, I think it's an important component of transparency to have people be able to see how like cases are treated and to understand the reasoning that the judges are using. And it's just a really important component of rule of law. So OAH has made a lot of tech progress with the e-filing, and it's, to me, been so slow on online opinions. But yay, credit where credit's due. New opinions are going up now, that's good. And it's not simple, nothing is simple. So I don't want to sound like I'm just harping and they're a terrible fault. It's a hard thing to do. Some cases involve very sensitive private information and need redactions, and it's just been harder than it should be technically.
Well, I mean, government, the 21st century government transparency is a different beast than it was a long time ago, and figuring out how we all sort of as a community work together is our challenge, right? Collectively. But I guess you both to talk about this, sort of how do we have that independence that we both talked about, so desired in its founding and a credit to OAH now, with the balance of having a real relationship with the parties that come forward, this high rate of pro se's, and then also the agencies who really get a really important feedback loop potentially from their experiences at OAH. So what do you see as the role and what's going well for OAH's sort of role in community with the parties that come forward?
Well, I think OAH judges by temperament and ethos are very committed to the fair administration of justice and recognize that people don't typically have lawyers. Some entities do, but a lot of the cases are of small dollar size, but they may be of huge importance to individuals. And everybody knows we don't have civil Gideon, and it's going to be a long time before people get lawyers for tickets that they didn't bring their trash can.
conversational, but it's exciting now to thank our co-host and wonderful Chief Judge Colleen Curry. Tell us a little bit about the key responsibilities of being the Chief Administrative Law Judge, if you will. I know many of our audience knows, but we also really, as we want to educate about the importance of this wonderful court, and then what you're really proud of right now.
Thank you, Misty. The Chief ALJ is the director of OIH. As such, I supervise the agency as a whole. The Establishment Act actually is very specific, and it says that the Chief Judge is, and I'm quoting here, accountable and responsible for the fairness, impartiality, effectiveness, and efficiency of litigation.
No pressure.
No pressure at all. And you know, the way I interpret that, it leads to what I see as my day-to-day responsibilities, and they are myriad. You know, I meet with cluster leadership teams to discuss case flow, problem solve difficulties, keep tabs on filings and case aging. I meet with the management team to discuss agency-wide issues, budgeting, strategic goals. I meet with principal ALJs to discuss case flow and share information. I review case filings and aging statistics. I meet with OAH's IT team to discuss issues, processes, and strategies. I evaluate employee performance. And I oversee management of budget, personnel, and if I'm real lucky, I actually get to adjudicate cases. On a less regular basis, but also key is I prepare reports for and attend quarterly OAH advisory committee meetings. I respond to inquiries from EOM, the DC Council, and I testify at council hearings, especially so why? It's
Lots of sleep, I imagine. So yeah, if you want to take a moment, considering this might be the first time that our audience has had the privilege of hearing you, what are something you're really proud of in your tenure? How long have you been involved?
I've been in the role since the middle of the pandemic. The mayor named me on the 8th of November 2020. I was confirmed May 4th, 2021. So it's been about yeah. And I have to say, going back to the pandemic, because that was a watershed moment for us and for many, many different reasons. But I am incredibly proud of how quickly we pivoted from, as Betsy said, all paper, all in-person hearings. And we literally, that was Friday afternoon, March 13th, 2020, we were notified that we were going remote. By the next Thursday morning, we were doing remote hearings. Things in a way that we had never done before. There were lots of bumps in the road, it was challenging. But I'm still really, really proud of how we're conducting our hearings because, again, as Betsy said, I think that we're providing a lot more access. It's a lot easier for somebody to get online to have a hearing and rather than having to spend a whole day for a 30-minute hearing because they have to get on a train and then a bus and then the metro or pay for parking and then they sit because our hearings don't always it really informs the public about what we do and how we do it. And I also have to put out a really big shout out to our judges. They write incredible decisions. And so this is also another source of pride.
Thank you. I think we were talking, earlier about reflecting the growth of OAH. That's even sort of listed the growth of caseload. We heard Chief Judge Lee talk about the challenges in Superior Court with growing caseloads, which can delay resolution. But your caseloads have grown. So how are you and your judges and your staff, who also are incredible public servants too, doing that backbone work, but how are y'all approaching sort of time resolution issues, and how are you hoping sort of as going forward to sort of communicate expectations and hit sort of goals with the public and for the court?
Well, we have several statistic metrics that I track regularly. They're really important because they provide a snapshot of the workload of the agency. Basic ones, the number of case filings we have per year, and the number of cases disposed per year. Those are two big ones. But what's really particularly helpful is to look at the rate of disposition. That's the ratio of cases disposed versus cases filed. Right? And so if we're closing at the same number of cases that we get, then we're in good shape. We're healthy, we have enough staff, we have enough resources. If that percentage is below 100%, if we're getting more cases filed than we are disposing, then there's a problem. Is it a resource problem? Is it an efficiency problem? We really have to sort of dig into that. And sort of a subset of that, another metric is the number of cases that are filed in each case type per month, per year. If, for example, the number of DOB notices that are filed with our agency every month stays the same.
Break your acronym down.
Department of Buildings.
Yeah.
An enforcement agency may issue notices of infraction for housing violations, housing regulation violations. If the number of those cases every month stays the same, then we are able to predict what resources we need and better manage our internal human resources so that we know where we need people. If we have a number of cases that in a particular case type that increases suddenly, we know that we have to find more resources. We have to poach from somewhere else to address that. If the number decreases suddenly, then we know we may be able to reallocate some of those resources. So keeping track of that, I think, is really, really important.
And there's, I'm sure, really wide variation in the complexity of the different types of matters that come structurally. And seeing how y'all pivoted with the unemployment compensation claims during the pandemic and the seismic shift that had to take for everyone, I think are good examples of that. I guess I'm going to make you do some potential bragging as well, which is, I suspect you sit in coalition or in conference meetings with other peers across the country, but what do you think makes OAH unique, or how are you trying to sort of take those lessons learned from peer centralized panels and either adopt those things, or you're leading by example and they're coming to you, so what makes our OAH unique nationally?
I think one of the very important things in discussions with directors and other central hearing panels across the nation is that we enjoy support from both the legislative branch and the executive branch. And that is not the case in other central hearing panels. There are central hearing panels that their governor's office is trying to disband them, or the attorney general's office is trying to disband them, and they're struggling with that. We are lucky here that we have unique support in that. Our case types, the variety of cases that we hear is unique, but most central hearing panels have variations. One of the unique things is that we hear both unemployment insurance and public sector workers' compensation. That's something that we're unique in. There are a few central hearing panels that hear unemployment insurance and a few that hear workers' compensation, but we're the only one that does both. So the range that we have is very unique as well. And again, I'll brag about the quality of the adjudication for our judges. We have a really deep and great bench.
So I'm going to look to all three of you to give kind of a comment on what do you hope will ceremonial things to present briefly before we do that, but you saw the staff and the judges of OAH raise their hands. Grab one of them, thank them for congratulate them on their anniversary at the party, buy them a free drink, as I like to say, at the reception, and hear their thoughts, right? We, of course, went through a panel discussion that included all the voices. Yes.
A president's prerogative, as long as it's okay with the chief and the esteemed panelists. Can we have all the ALJs come up and stand there so we can get a group picture?
Oh, sure.
Would
When
that be all
we
right?
finish these two ceremonies, I think that's a lovely idea. Let's see if we can get people to humor us to do that before you head downstairs. Do you want to pick off our two?
Betsy?
Okay. This is from the mayor. Congratulations, Office of Administrative Hearings 20th Anniversary, December 11th, 2024. As Mayor of Washington, D.C., I'm pleased to congratulate the D.C. Office of Administrative Hearings, OAH, on 20 years of outstanding public service. Established in 2001 by the D.C. Council, OAH provides critical and streamlined adjudication of services for several district agencies. The office has grown across 2 decades to include more than 30 administrative law judges who hear cases involving Medicaid and other public benefits, rent control, building, health, and fire code violations, and other cases that greatly impact district residents' quality of life. As an independent agency, OAH has remained a trusted source for fair and unbiased hearings. It has held firm in its mission to provide residents with a fair, efficient, and effective system to manage and resolve administrative litigation. OAH has strived for 20 years now to increase efficiency, transparency, and responsiveness. To Chief Administrative Law Judge M. Colleen Curry, and to the entire OAH team, thank you for upholding and personifying what I like to call our DC values. I am proud of each of you and look forward to even more years of service to the residents of the District of Columbia. To members of the judiciary, court employees, and the Council for Court Excellence, and guests of tonight's reception in honor of OAH, I thank you as well for your contribution, support, and commitment to providing necessary and fair legal services to residents all across all the wards of our city. Once again, I'm happy to join the 700,000 residents of Washington, D.C. in congratulating the D.C. Office of Administrative Hearings on 20 years of service. Muriel Bowser, Mayor of Washington, D.C.
And I'd also like to introduce Seniors Legislative Aide to Councilmember Brianna Nadeau, Sabrina Caddy.
On behalf of Chairwoman Brianna Doe, she chairs the committee on behalf of Chairwoman Councilmember Brianna Doe, who chairs the Committee on Public Works and Operations, we present the Office of Administrative Hearings with a ceremonial resolution.
All right, well, with that, thank you. It was such a pleasure to have the brain trust of thinking through this wonderful anniversary with the 3 of you, with all of you to be here. So we will try to do an OAH photo op if people are willing to do it before you go, and then we'll head downstairs to celebrate in the atrium. Please don't leave, stay and drink. It's already rainy, so stick around. Oh, yeah, please bring your staff too.
So staff and ALJs, if you would come up.
See everyone downstairs if you're not OAH.
Where is the best?
Thank you for sponsoring tonight. You're welcome.